Peace family, it's Samantha from Black Nation News, and today I wanted to talk about Nipsey Hussle and some of the stories that have come out recently, some of the latest stories that have come out recently to discuss the autopsy of Nipsey Hussle, something that occurs, some gang, I guess I won't say gang, but some violence that I'm already being brainwashed by the media, but some violence that broke out at Nipsey Hussle's memorial. And they also apparently found a suspect, and I'm putting that in air quotes, of Nipsey Hussle's murder. They apparently have found some black guy to be their fall guy. So I just have to say this, in my heart, maybe I just don't have all the details, but I don't feel that this was gang related, as you guys already know from, if you probably already watched my other video or listened to my other video. But okay, so I'm gonna just go ahead and read the articles and start from there. And I want us to really read between the lines to flesh out what is really going on here. So first, let's start with the article so I'm going to try to keep the timeline in order. So this came 5 hours ago. Then we have, because black people, we are in America. This is a very, very, very racist country. Out of all the countries that had slavery, America was the very last country to let it go. I mean, they were holding on to it for dear life. So this is a country that can't stand black people, African Americans, and never could stand up. They don't like us. We know that COINTELPRO is real. For all you idiots who are out there speaking crap on people who are thinking for themselves and not just following the crowds and saying, we're having all these conspiracies and we're the Negroes who have these conspiracies, and it's not a conspiracy, it's thinking, it's critical thinking. When you live in a country that had COINTELPRO, which was your own FBI government working to destroy the Black Panther movement, which was not a violent movement originally. Now, I think in near the end, it got, crazy because of how people were dealing with the Black Panther movement, because they did, white people did feel threatened. The government felt threatened. And even Hoover, this freaking idiot who was gay and black and just having a complete identity crisis, even he had a report that stated that they had a fear of a black messiah. So that is America's greatest fear, is that there will be a black messiah, someone who is black, like a Nipsey Hussle or Malcolm X or Martin Luther King Jr. or, Fred Hampton, Tupac. That's their greatest fear, is that there's going to be a black man who will lead black people out of the bad situation we're in. And Nipsey Hussle was one of those leaders who was doing a lot of amazing things for the black community. He was teaching black people how to be entrepreneurs. He was pushing STEM. He was a black father, a black partner to Lauren London. He had, he was just an amazing person all around. And he was also supposedly supposed to be working with LAPD, which I think is like a hot mess, but he was supposed to be working with LAPD to talk about gang violence in Rock Nation. The reason why I think that's full of shit, because I feel like if the police force and the government really wanted to end violence in these communities, they could just do it. And this violence began because of the government and the police force putting crack and guns in our neighborhoods. Where did we get money for guns? Where are we getting these guns from? Where did we get crack, cocaine, and all that? We're not creating it. It came from somewhere. I promise you, I am not going to listen to a person who has always been my enemy, ever since I've known history. These people who do not look like us have never done anything to show that they like us. It's full of shit. Like, let's be honest. Like, you guys know me. Like, I'm going to keep it 100. This is crap. Like, there's nothing that, like, they will have to show me video footage. They will have to show me reports. Like, there's no way I'm going to believe that Nipsey Hussle has been out walking around for 20 some years, and now all of a sudden he's shot when he's doing a lot of positive things. It doesn't make sense. Apparently, if he's not, and people are like, well, there's jealous people. Well, there should have always been jealous people. He ain't become successful yesterday, you know. So I never heard of that. That ain't a reason for somebody to shoot him. So let's look at this story really quickly. And I'm going to read each story aloud because I want you guys to really, I hate this word, but I'm going to say it because I can't think of a better one. I want you guys to flesh through what each story is saying. So this story was posted 5 hours ago. So it says, Nipsey Hussle, LAPD names suspect in shooting after rapper's autopsy is completed. So just think about that. You know, they took the time to complete his autopsy, and now they're revealing the suspect. I don't know why they needed to complete his autopsy first for us to tell us who the suspect is, but interesting how that just falls together and so neatly. So the Los Angeles Police Department has released a name, and we know LAPD is extremely corrupt. It's a gang in itself, just like NYPD and all these other police departments. It's a racist foot soldier gang. Okay, so let me continue. The Los Angeles Police Department has released the name of a suspect in the shooting death of rapper Nipsey Hussle. Police have identified the suspect as Eric Holder. Okay, so let's just stop there. Do we know who Eric Holder is, guys? Because that name sounds really familiar. Oh, his name, Eric Holder, was the Attorney General of the United States. He served 2009 to 2015. So that's just irony in itself. Like, why does he have the same name as the Attorney General? That's kind of weird. After, the Attorney General recently blasted, I think, New York for something that they were doing that was probably racist. But anyways, and they tweeted this. They did not put a press conference together. They didn't have an article written where, like, a story put out there that says Eric Holder is the suspect. But usually with someone this big, someone this famous, because if this was a white girl missing or something like that, they would be having several press conferences. So I'm wondering, like, where was the press conference? Did we have one and I just missed it? And honestly, it should not just be a local news station that's having this press conference. It should be national, because obviously Nipsey Hussle is known internationally. So can we at least nationally be up to date on what happened to someone that he has many, many fans? Okay, so let me continue. Eric Holder is wanted for homicide in the shooting of Nipsey Hussle. He was last seen in a 2016 white four-door Chevy Cruze, California license plate 7RJD742. Anyone with information related to his whereabouts or this deadly shooting is urged to contact South Bureau Homicide at 323-786-5100. And I wonder if there's any pictures of that Chevy Cruze, by the way. I want photos. I want blood. I want all kinds of evidence. And reports, and I want the feds to fill us in and let us know, do they have a secret COINTELPRO report behind this, because I know they do. Hussle died from gunshot wounds of the head and torso. And honestly, I'm going to tell you this. They had to produce somebody, because Tupac, Malcolm X, like, there's so many people that died the same way, this secretive COINTELPRO covert type way, and nobody knows who the killer is to this day. So they had to produce someone, because I told people they're not going to find anyone. And this guy that they done thrown out here in the front, he probably is an informant or an agent, or he probably was already on his way to jail anyway for something else. It's just, this doesn't convince me, basically. The rapper's autopsy was completed Monday and his death was certified a homicide. Hussle, a 33-year-old rapper whose name was Amayas Asghedam, was shot multiple times outside the South Los Angeles apparel store, the Marathon Clothing, around 3:20 Sunday and pronounced dead at the hospital. By Monday, hundreds of people had gathered in front of the store to pay their respects. A memorial of candles, flowers, and paintings took shape, and some of Hussle's songs blared through speakers. But after nightfall, the crowd grew violent, and a stabbing contributed to a massive stampede with at least 19 people injured. Let's see here. On Tuesday morning, Police Chief Michael R. Moore will address the surge in violence in the city of Los Angeles, and there will be an update on the murder investigation of Nipsey Hussle, according to LAPD's website. Meanwhile, a confab collaboration. I'm not sure what they're calling it, confab. Hussle. A confab Hussle had requested. I'm still lost at that word. I'm sorry. I'm trying to figure out what that really is. That a shortened for something. Okay, so let me start. Meanwhile, a confab Hussle had requested with the Los Angeles Police Commission on how to stop gang violence, previously set for Monday, is being rescheduled in the rapper's honor. Steve Soboroff, president of the commission, told NBC News and ABC News, USA Today has reached out to the commissioner's office. Soboroff revealed earlier Monday that he and Moore had a Monday meeting scheduled with Hussle and Jay-Z's record label Rock Nation, to talk about ways he could help stop gang violence and help us help kids. Oh, please. This is so full of crap. He tweeted, "I'm so very sad." Another thing I think is weird is why is Jay-Z over there in California? You know, his label is in California talking about some gang violence and trying to figure that out. But in New York, is there still black on black crime there? So what are we doing? And for them to be pulling in rappers to help them talk about the gang violence, I think is a load of crap. I watch a lot of IDTV, and cops have informants. They have ways that if they wanted to end this violence, they could. They managed to do it in white neighborhoods. They could do it in black neighborhoods too without rappers collaborating with them. I'm just not buying it. So they said a native of Crenshaw, Hussle was widely admired for his community building and investment in local businesses, public schools, and young adults learning coding and other tech skills. I remember the beauty that he saw in our community and the beauty that he was. He loved us. Film director Ava DuVernay tweeted, "He's left that love with us and it cannot die. Rest in power, King. You mattered." Born on August 15, 1985, Hussle said his first passion was music, but getting resources was tough after leaving his mother's house at 14 to live with his grandmother. He said he got involved in street life as he tried to support himself, and he joined the gang rolling 60s neighborhood Crips as a teenager. "I grew up in a gang culture," Hussle told the Los Angeles Times in 2018. "We dealt with death, with murder. It was like living in a war zone where people die on these blocks and everybody's a little bit immune to it." So this was back, he joined when he was like, 14, 15? So that was the 90s? Like 20 years ago. So it was like living in a war zone where people die on these blocks and everybody is a little bit immune to it. I guess they call it post-traumatic stress when you have people that have been at war for such a long time. I think LA suffers from that because it's not normal yet we embrace it like it is after a while. Okay. Well, so basically if you're dating it back, I mean, how long has the Crips and Bloods been around? And there was just having a sit down with a rap label and a rapper to talk about this gang violence. It's been around for how long? 40 years? Because I know I've been hearing about the Crips and Bloods since I was like 5, 10 years old, like around 8 or 9, 10 years old. And that I was born in the 80s, so we can't figure it out. And let's keep it 100. Like, that area is becoming like predominantly Hispanic. So the gang violence that we're speaking of is usually going to be Hispanic gang, like Mexican gangs, like MS-13. So I don't understand why we're waiting till like 2019 to like 4 decades later to talk about gang violence between Crips and Bloods when it seems like that violence is basically has fizzled out, like it's not there like that to be talking about it. Like you should have talked about it back in the 90s when it really was like bad, so that's full of crap right there. So let me look at an article really quickly. So they have, I want to talk about an article about Hispanic gangs in LA. All right, so we have this here called Latina Lista. I don't know what that means. So let me read this. I'm just gonna read some of this. This is listing like some of the Mexican gangs, because they don't talk about the gang violence in LA like they used to. I follow the news, and when I was a kid, like I would hear about Crips and Bloods, and I did not live in California. I lived in Virginia, so why am I hearing about Crips and Bloods? But like now, you can barely name a gang in America, like a Mexican gang. The only one I know of is MS-13, and that's because they literally moved their way into Virginia as well. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't know about them either. So it's like, again, they're highlighting black people being violent towards each other, but we don't highlight how violent Hispanic people are, because the reality is they want the Hispanics to come in to water down the minority pot. So, so basically they can make black people an underclass. So when we try to fight for certain benefits, it's kind of drowned out by all the immigrants who came like yesterday to America, and they've got their handout, so they can kind of focus on them and look like they're not racist, look like they're doing good for others, and at the end of the day, black people get left out of the equation like we always do. So this is saying a guide to the creation, rise, and rule of Latino gangs in the U.S. The murder of a Latino gang member reported this past May in Vice. This was written September 17, 2015. The murder of a Latino gang member reported this past May in Vice serves as the backdrop to the widespread attention currently being pushed on California's record dryness and its struggling agriculture production, much of which is found in the Central Valley. Despite gang-related crime in Los Angeles dropping, did we hear that? Despite gang-related crime in Los Angeles dropping, the same can't always be said for smaller towns. At the heart of most of the crime are Latino gangs. Driven out of Los Angeles by several factors, drowsy little towns like Modesto aren't so sleepy and safe anymore. The small town, so let me read that again. So they've been driven out of Los Angeles. So it sounds like to me they have already cleaned up the gang violence, because it's not in LA. It's basically been driven out, because that's what cops can do. They can get rid of gang violence if they wanted to. The small town of Modesto is home to approximately 200,000 people. Cities and farms that lie across the valley provide a sizable percentage of the nation's fruits and vegetables. With some of the region's minority communities, young Latinos suffer from hopelessness extreme enough to drive them to join illegal organizations run by men living in penitentiaries hundreds of miles away. 3 Latino gangs that consistently appear in law enforcement's crosshairs, but that we don't really hear about, are M13, was also known as MS-13, Sinaloa Cartel, Serranos X3, and the Mexican Mafia. She said 3 Latino gangs. That's actually 4. Because she just said MS-13, Sinaloa Cartel, Serranos X3, and the Mexican Mafia. That I just read 4 different Mexican gangs or Latino gangs. So MS-13, Mars Salvatrucha, also known as MS-13, is a global criminal gang that started in Los Angeles, California. It has expanded to other sections of the United States, Canada, Mexico, and Central America. The bulk of the gang is ethnically formed of Central Americans, mostly Salvadorians, and and operating in metropolitan and suburban neighborhoods. Yes, because it's all the way out in, oh my gosh, like Loudoun County, and that is like a freaking one of the most expensive, rich neighborhoods in Northern Virginia. So why is there a gang living out there? But there is. In America, the MS-13 has an unusually massive membership in Los Angeles County. Did we hear that, guys? They have an unusually massive membership in Los Angeles County and the San Francisco Bay Area. I don't hear, I'll get to the Crips and Bloods in a minute. In Northern California and Washington, D.C. A heavy presence of MS-13 is also found in Maryland, New York, Massachusetts, and North Carolina. Members of MS distinguish themselves by tattoos wrapping the body and also frequently the face. They are infamous for their use of force and a subcultural moral code that predominantly consists of ruthless vengeance and cruel reprisals. This cruelty of the prominent members of the Maras or Mareos earned them a route to be selected by the Sinaloa cartel, clashing against Los Zetas in a continuing drug war south of the United States border. Sinaloa cartel is a global drug trafficking, money laundering, and organized crime organization. Founded during the mid-1980s, the Sinaloa cartel is based principally in Culiacan, Sinaloa. The United States intelligence community recognizes the please help me if I'm not saying this right, Sinaloa cartel, the most dominant drug trafficking organization in the world. So this is the United States intelligence community recognizes this gang as being the most dominant drug trafficking organization in the world. And in 2011, the Los Angeles Times called it Mexico's most powerful organized crime group. Okay, so Los Angeles Times called it the Mexico's most powerful organized crime group. The Sinaloa cartel is connected with the label Golden Triangle, which applies to the states of Sinaloa, Durango, and Chihuahua. The region is a major generator of Mexican opium and marijuana. According to the U.S. Attorney General, the Sinaloa cartel handles shipping and distributing over 190 tons of coke into the U.S. The next group, Serranos X3, Sir 13, or Serranos it's called Serranos, Sir 13, or Serranos X3, are associations of loosely associated gangs that give tribute to the Mexican mafia while in American federal prisons. Many Serrano gangs have disputes with one another, and the only time this animosity is forgotten is when they enter the prison system. Thus, combat is prevalent among various Serranos gangs, even though they share the same general identity. Mexican Mafia. The Mexican Mafia is a highly organized Mexican-American criminal organization in the United States. Despite its name, the Mexican Mafia did not originate in Mexico and were entirely an American criminal prison group. Law enforcement officials report that there are currently 155 to 300 official members of the Mexican Mafia, with around 990 associates who assist in carrying out its illegal activities in the hopes of becoming full members. Besides the restraining, that's like over 1,000 people, just as members, or basically members. Besides the restraining effect of brutal gangs, other dynamics are at work as well to reduce overall gang violence. So it says, besides the restraining effect of brutal gangs, other dynamics are at work as well to reduce overall gang violence. So gang violence declines. Okay, did we hear that? Gang violence declines. So it says the decade of death lasted from 1988, I was born in 1982, to 1998. Okay, so basically for 20 years, there's really not a whole lot going on. 1,000 people a year were killed in Los Angeles during that decade. Gangs didn't rule all the neighborhoods, but the ones they ruled, they terrorized. Drugs were moved in the open on street corners. Drive-by shootings were frequent, and wearing the wrong color on the wrong street was seen as a death wish. It seems unlikely now. There are still sections of Los Angeles that are disastrous, where blight reigns and brutality rules, but to believe that LA is unchanged is to ignore these statistics. In the 4 years, 2008 to 2012, violent crimes dropped nationally by an average of 16%. In Los Angeles, the drop was sharper, even in gang areas. Compton by 30%, Bell Gardens by 50%, El Monte by 50%. Gang-related murders in LA have dropped over 66%, and gang-related crimes have dropped 55%. What's behind the decline? The only answer on which everyone agrees is there's no single answer. There are several theories. If the theories are considered and how they build on each other, it can be easy to see why Los Angeles is safer than it's been since Eisenhower was in the White House. Prison gangs are rational. David Scarbeck, author of The Social Order of the Underworld, argues that gangs offer protection and governance where established institutions have failed. Scarbeck argues that it makes sense for prisoners to join gangs. Gangs in prison weren't around until the early 50s. Inmates were ruled according to the convict code, which convicted of unwritten rules and followed by everyone. With a small prison population, it worked. Reputations, fear of ostracism, and assault kept everyone in line, and there was no need for gangs. As the prison population grew, the code started to fall apart. It wasn't possible to keep a badass reputation with the huge numbers of inmates. Violent inmates made the prisons more dangerous, and correction officers couldn't be relied on to keep everyone safe. Gangs began to provide protection. Later, they developed businesses that controlled the prisoners' illegal market in products such as guns and drugs. Even the division of gangs along racial lines is reasonable. To function properly, all members of a prison gang accept responsibility for the actions of the other members. The ability to identify other gang members is critical to keep outsiders from damaging the gangs. The group's reputation and race provide a way of doing so. The group's reputation and race provides a way of them doing so. Okay, I see. So they said this. The ability to identify other gang members is critical to keep the outsiders from damaging the group's reputation, and race provides a way of doing so. In an all-male environment where everyone wears the same clothes, race provides a lot of information fast. It is possible to hide or change. Segregation prevents inmates from moving from group to group. More police. When William Bratton took over the LAPD in 2002, he immediately hired 1,000 new cops. They weren't brought on to bust heads. Instead, the department's new manager became, "We can't arrest our way out of the problem." Bratton encouraged cops to get involved in the lives of the people in the neighborhoods they were policing. Bratton even tied officers' careers to their success in community outreach. The division commanders became community problem solvers and lobbied on behalf of residents for city services, even for mundane things like repairing potholes and trimming trees. Comstat was something else Bratton brought in besides an attitude change. Comstat offers real-time statistical monitoring of criminal activity and has helped shift commanders better deploy resources. RICO. So I don't know if you guys ever heard of the RICO laws, but this is going to explain it. When the racketeer influence and corrupt organizations, also known as RICO Act, passed in 1970, the target was organized crime groups such as the Genovese and Gambino families. RICO sent John Gotti and others to jail. RICO has morphed into a tool used against street gangs. Prosecutors charge a person even if that person was nowhere near the crime scene, but instead conspired with those who actually did the crime. Additionally, a pretrial financial restraining order can be issued to seize all of the defendant's assets. With forfeitable property gone, the gang is kept from liquidating its ill-gained profits. A RICO conviction will land the convicted in federal prison where sentences are not reduced and parole isn't an option. As written in Pacific Standard, to my eye, the results of most RICO prosecutions against Southern California gangs have been climatic, as if a series of anthills had been not just displaced but dug up whole. Location. In Los Angeles, real estate is a factor. Rising home prices throughout the city have changed the demographics of many neighborhoods. Even the worst neighborhoods where Crips once resided are now filling up with young white hipsters or new immigrants. Gang neighborhoods have become less insular and less territory obsessed. Real estate prices have also forced some of the worst out of town and into places where they don't know as many people. It can be hard to be a thug when you're stuck in traffic on the 405. Corner Boy. Intersections in South Central LA were among the most vicious area during the decade of death. City Council passed a gang injunction that made it a misdemeanor for gang members to hang out in public. The logic is simple. When you don't have kids hanging out, there's no one to shoot or do the shooting. Mexican Mafia. There are less than 300 members of the Mexican Mafia, but they are known for the murders, human trafficking, and drug dealing that they orchestrate from behind bars. In 2011, for example, the Mexican Mafia ordered an Azusa, California gang to carry out the racial cleansing of all blacks from the largely Latino city. Okay, let me read that again. In 2011, for example, the Mexican Mafia ordered an Azusa, California gang to carry out the racial cleansing of all blacks from the largely Latino city. Ironically, the Mexican Mafia has helped clean up the LA gang problem. Its brutality has frightened off potential members who will otherwise be seeking to join other gangs. The awesome specter of retribution by Mexican Mafia has also changed criminal behavior in prison. The Pacific Standard notes that most prisoners who seek protected custody in America are Latino gang members from Southern California. The reason? They are afraid of the Mexican Mafia. Let me read that again. The Pacific Standard notes that most prisoners who seek protective custody in America are Latino gang members from Southern California. That's where LA is. The reason? They are afraid of the Mexican Mafia. Intervention. Some of the credit for reducing gang violence goes to the city's network of faith-based groups. When it comes to intervention programs, Homeboy Industries has been the most successful. Homeboy Industries helps keep $15,000 a year from returning to street life by providing job training and hiring former gang members in one of his businesses. We provide an exit ramp from street life, said Reverend Greg Boyle, Homeboy Industries founder. Community always trumps gangs. Community always trumps gangs. That's like the sentence of the quote of the year, because it even has Trump's stupid name in there. Race-based gangs. Simple demographics leads to the mostly race-based gangs. Individuals who live in the area inside gangs territories tend to be of the same racial makeup due mainly to socioeconomic issues. Most modern-day gangs don't care about race. At least race isn't their main focus. Gangs are not sitting around theorizing in academic ivory towers about race relations and studying power dynamics. They're mainly concerned with survival and money and the acquisition of more money. Admittedly, though, some prison gangs do care about race. Often inmates tend to fall out along racial lines and have developed powerful racial alliances. Gangs such as the Black Dragons, Watching, and the Vietnamese Asian Boys, Puerto Rican Latin Kings, Bloods, Crips, and Pyrus best illustrate the racial lines along which gang affiliations are made. Both gangs were formed in response to harassment from Mexican gangs in California. Despite this, in the California penal system, one of the more powerful racial alliances has been between Mexican Mafia and the Aryan Brotherhood. So we have the Mexican Mafia and the Aryan Brotherhood are white people. They're white racists. The alliance wields considerable power and reaches to the street. So there's a powerful racial alliance between Mexican Mafia and the Aryan Brotherhood. So they basically, teamed up together, I guess? So that's interesting. It sounds like they're against black people. Almost all other minority group gangs in America were formed initially to combat systemic white-owned minority racism. SouthCentralHistory.com points out that Latino and black gangs in South Central Los Angeles were formed in response to white racism. The site says the biggest of these groups were the spook hunters. Spook is a pejorative expression used for black people. Throughout the 1940s, the Ku Klux Klan also appeared in LA. The initial black and Latino gangs were an answer to these white gangs. The gangs served as security for black and Latino neighborhoods. There may be some truth to that. Following the Watts riots of 1965, white flight left a lot of South Los Angeles to become mostly black and Latino. This led to many of the gangs beginning to battle each other since there was no longer white gangs. At the height of the Civil Rights Movement, gangs almost completely ended as many of the big gangs became active in the Civil Rights Movement. Nick Woodridge, They said Nick Woodridge is a partner in the law practice book and associates PLLC, which protects the rights and interests of the minority and immigrant populations of New York. All right, so we basically learned from that just how bad the Mexican gangs are, the Latino gangs are, and it is continually stated throughout this entire article that gang violence is down since the decade of death, which was 1988 to 1998, and it also reiterated what I said about the Bloods and Crips have broken up like a long time ago, and the majority of the gangs that are happening now are Latino gangs, and those gangs are none of the gangs are even really in LA like that. I've seen black people complaining about the Hispanic gangs or the Latino gangs that are coming into LA and terrorizing black people because they're basically overpopulating the black communities that used to be, the once black communities. So this further explains how Nipsey Hussle's death by another black person based on Bloods and Crips theory doesn't work. And people who are talking crap about people who believe that is something that has to do with the feds or the government or big pharma, you sound as stupid as you think we sound, because Crips and Bloods have not been gangbanging like that since the 90s. So Nipsey Hussle has been basically walking around for 20 years, from 1990, around 1998 to, he's basically lived his whole life. He's 33 years old. But after gang violence ended, 1998 to 2019, he's been walking and living and doing him for over 20 years. And then once he becomes a positive role model, now he gets shot? Nah, that doesn't add up. To me, you would get shot when you're gangbanging, if you're still out there selling drugs and you're doing all this crazy stuff. I don't see somebody randomly getting shot when things start to get good for, things are been good for him for a minute. Honestly, I never even heard Nipsey Hussle in the news or anywhere as a negative person. I didn't even know him like that. I didn't know his music. But every time I did see him, it was usually positive. It usually had to do with something being positivity. I didn't see much negative. Honestly, to tell you the truth, I never saw any negative anything. The only negative thing I saw was recent. They thought that he got into some brawl at some nightclub or whatever, but it was over mistaken identity. It wasn't even supposed to be him who this person was attacking. They thought it was him because he wore a plaid shirt, but it was somebody else that they were really after. So miss me with this bullshit. I'm sorry. I don't care how many details they're coming out with all of a sudden. I still am not going to drink that WS Kool-Aid. I still don't buy it. And as black people, we do need to be free, more critical thinking. People, we cannot take things at face value. Me personally, I will believe a black person over a white person any day of the week, because white people have given me plenty of reason based on their track record to not trust them. So that's all I wanted to say on the Nipsey Hussle new findings, recent stories that have come out that's related to his death. There are a lot of other topics I wanted to do, but I'm running out of time, so I'm going to cut this video and I'm going to make another video on those other topics. Primarily, this video was to discuss like what the gang violence culture is like in LA today. And it's on a sharp decline. Like, it's just not what it used to be back in the 90s. Like, I don't know where people have been. I don't know if they weren't paying attention. But for someone who lives all the way in Virginia, I know when Crips and Bloods was bad, and I know when it wasn't. I know when I heard about it and I was a kid, and as a grown woman, not hearing much about it at all. The only time I heard about the Crips and Bloods was when they were uniting to fight against white supremacy, like the article stated. That's originally why they were created, was to fight against the KKK. They were protecting their neighborhoods. They were trying to protect themselves because the police were the KKK. So who else were they going to go to for protection? This is America. This is this country. It's extremely racist. And I know a lot of you have cognitive dissonance and you don't want to admit that that's the truth, but it's kind of like being an addict. The sooner you realize the truth, the sooner you can find treatment and kill that problem. All right, guys. So until I talk to you again, take care of yourselves and each other. Peace, love, and light. Bye.